Britt. I couldn't forget the young Apache woman, even though they gave me the perfect wife, said the rancher. The rancher arrived at the edge of the vast landscape just as the sun was beginning to rise. Britt. The sky was painted in soft oranges and pinks, and the air smelled fresh, carrying the scent of dry earth and grass. He had traveled a long way from his small town, leaving behind familiar streets, family, and friends. The ranch was large, stretching far into the hills, and it was clear that managing it would not be an easy task. He had come with a determination to build a life here, to work hard and create something lasting. But yet, beneath his confidence, there was a quiet feeling of loneliness that he could not shake. As he stepped out of his wagon, he looked around at the sprawling land. The cattle were scattered across the field, slowly grazing, their low moos echoing in the open space. The ranch buildings, weathered and sturdy, stood strong against the morning light. Britt. He felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. This place promised a new beginning, but he knew it would demand every bit of his strength and skill. Britt. He carried his tools, his plans, and a heavy sense of responsibility, knowing that the ranch's success rested on his shoulders. In those first days, his routine was simple yet exhausting. Britt. He woke with the sun, tended to the cattle, repaired fences, and made sure the barns and stables were in order. The work was physical, requiring sweat, patience, and precision. Britt. Sometimes, as he mended a broken fence or guided the cattle to a new pasture, he allowed his mind to wander. He thought about the life he had left behind and the people he had known, but more often he focused on the tasks at hand, understanding that the ranch would not thrive if he allowed himself to become distracted. It was during one of these early mornings, while he was checking the farthest pastures, that he first saw her. Britt. She was young, perhaps a little older than a teenager, with long dark hair tied back simply, and eyes that held a mix of curiosity and quiet strength. She was walking along a small path near the river that ran along the edge of the ranch, carrying a bundle of wood. There was something about the way she moved, graceful yet purposeful, that drew his attention. She seemed at ease in the land, familiar with its rhythms and its moods. Britt. Their first encounter was brief. He stopped his horse at a distance, unsure of how to approach her. Britt. She noticed him and gave a small, polite nod before continuing on her way. It was a simple gesture, yet it left an impression on him. Britt. There was a warmth in her eyes that suggested kindness, and a quiet confidence that made him respect her instantly. He found himself thinking about her long after she had disappeared from view, wondering who she was and how she had come to live in such a remote place. Britt. Over the following days, he saw her again, sometimes near the river, other times tending small gardens or gathering herbs. Britt. Each time he noticed details about her life. The careful way she handled the plants, the gentle way she spoke to younger children nearby, and the natural respect she showed to the animals. It was clear that she understood the land in a way that went beyond simple knowledge. Britt. She was connected to it, as if she and the earth had grown together over many years. Though their interactions were short, a subtle bond began to form. Britt. He would greet her from a distance, and she would respond with a soft smile. Sometimes they exchanged a few words about the weather, the animals, or the work that needed to be done. Britt. Those moments, simple and fleeting, carried a sense of familiarity and understanding that was rare in his life. He felt a quiet joy in seeing her, a lightness that contrasted with the heavy responsibilities of managing the ranch. Britt. He began to notice that she had a way of seeing the world that was different from his own. Britt. While he focused on tasks, schedules, and the efficiency of the ranch, she seemed to appreciate the small, fleeting moments, the way the sunlight danced on the river, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, the patterns of clouds across the sky. Britt. There was a simplicity in her perspective, a reminder that life was not only about work and survival, but also about noticing beauty and holding it close. At times he imagined conversations that never happened, stories that were never shared. Britt. He wondered about her childhood, her family, and her dreams.
He found himself drawn to her not just because of her appearance, but because of the quiet strength she carried, the way she moved through the world with purpose and gentleness at the same time.
There was a wisdom in her that made him pause and reflect on his own life, his own choices, and the future he hoped to build. Despite the growing interest, he was careful. He understood that she belonged to a different world, with traditions, customs, and expectations that he could not fully know. He kept his distance, observing and learning, allowing the bond to grow slowly, like a river carving its path through the land. He respected her space, knowing that any forceful advance could destroy the delicate trust forming between them. One afternoon, as he repaired a fence near the edge of the woods, she appeared carrying water for her family. Desperate, he greeted her with a nod, and she responded with a smile. The sun was warm on their backs, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves around them. For a few moments there was silence, but it was not awkward. It was a shared recognition of two lives intersecting briefly in the vastness of the land. He felt a pull toward her, a desire to know her better, yet he restrained himself, savoring the small, precious moments they had. Evenings on the ranch were quiet. After a long day of work, he would sit outside the cabin, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned deep shades of red and purple, and the stars began to appear one by one. It was during these hours that his thoughts often returned to the young Apache woman. He thought about her smile, the way she moved, and the stories she had shared about her family and her land. Her presence lingered in his mind, a gentle reminder that life could surprise him in ways he had never expected. In those first weeks, he began to realize that this connection, though unspoken, was shaping his days. Work remained important, but the quiet anticipation of seeing her, even for a brief moment, added a new layer of meaning to his life. It was not just curiosity or attraction. It was a sense of recognition, a feeling that some encounters were meant to leave a lasting mark on the heart. Though he tried to focus solely on the ranch, the thought of her often crept into his mind during quiet moments, feeding the cattle, repairing the barn, or simply watching the wind move through the grass. He found himself speaking her name silently, imagining what it would be like to know her better, to hear her voice more fully, to share a part of his life with her. Yet he also understood that circumstances, distance, and social boundaries made such a connection complicated. He could only cherish the moments they had, and let the memory of her presence guide him through the days. By the end of the first month, the rancher felt a change within himself. The work was still hard, the days long, but there was a new warmth in his heart. He had arrived with the hope of building a life, but he had not anticipated the quiet joy of discovering another soul who could touch his in unexpected ways. The young Apache woman had become a part of his world, even if only in fleeting glimpses and brief conversations. She had reminded him that life, no matter how demanding, always held space for connection, beauty, and unexpected bonds. As he prepared for the night, lighting a small fire outside the cabin, he thought about tomorrow. The possibility of seeing her again, the chance to exchange a few words, the simple pleasure of acknowledgement. He understood that this was just the beginning of a story that would shape his heart, a story that would follow him through the challenges and triumphs of ranch life. And though the days ahead would be filled with work, responsibility, and perhaps difficult choices, he carried with him a quiet hope, a sense that something rare and meaningful had entered his life. And so, beneath the endless sky and the watchful stars, the rancher felt a stir of emotions he had not felt before, a mixture of admiration, longing, and curiosity. The young Apache woman had left her mark on him, not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through simple, profound presence. It was a beginning, a spark, a gentle reminder that some encounters, no matter how brief, could stay in the heart forever. Days passed on the ranch, and the routine of work became familiar to the rancher. The sun rose early, painting the sky with gold, and he spent long hours moving between pastures, feeding cattle, mending fences, and checking the barns. Brit, though the labor was exhausting, he found a quiet satisfaction in it. Each task accomplished brought a sense of control, a feeling that he was shaping something lasting with his own hands. Yet, beneath the satisfaction there was a lingering pull towards something, or someone, that had begun to occupy his thoughts more and more. That someone was the young Apache woman he had glimpsed along the river. Their meetings were still brief and unplanned, but now they seemed almost inevitable, as if the land itself conspired to bring them together. One morning, while checking the water troughs near the eastern pasture, he spotted her gathering wildflowers by the edge of a small grove. The colors of the blossoms, bright yellows, deep purples, soft whites, stood out against the green grass, and for a moment he forgot the work that awaited him. He simply watched her from a distance, noting how careful and gentle she was with every step, how she seemed fully aware of the life around her. When she noticed him, she smiled softly, not startled or afraid, but with a quiet friendliness that immediately eased any tension. He tipped his hat and offered a greeting, and she responded with a nod. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a simple joy that came from shared recognition. There was something almost magical about the way she existed in the world, calm, confident, and connected to the earth. Even though they had spoken only a few words, he sensed that she understood more than she said. As days turned into weeks, the rancher found that their encounters were becoming more frequent. Sometimes she appeared while he was tending the cattle, offering a brief good morning as she passed. Other times he would catch glimpses of her walking along the hills, carrying water or checking the small garden near her home. Each time their eyes met, and each time a silent understanding passed between them. But he realized that these small exchanges, though fleeting, were the beginnings of a deeper connection. One afternoon, as the sun hung high in the sky and the air was heavy with heat, he found himself repairing a broken fence near the edge of the woods. Sweat ran down his face and his hands were blistered from the labor, but he hardly noticed when she appeared carrying a basket of herbs. She paused at a respectful distance, her eyes meeting his with calm curiosity. For the first time, he felt compelled to speak to her beyond a simple greeting. "Good afternoon," he said, wiping his brow. "Those herbs." "Do you use them for cooking or something else?" She smiled faintly. "Mostly for medicine," she replied. "My family taught me which ones help with certain aches or fevers." Her voice was soft but confident, and he could sense the pride she took in knowing the land and its gifts. "That's remarkable," he said, genuinely impressed. "I've been here for weeks, and I'm still learning about this place. You seem to know it better than anyone." Pride. Her eyes glimmered with a mix of pride and modesty. "We learn to live with the land, not against it," she said simply.
Her words struck him. There was a wisdom in her statement that he had not expected from someone so young.
She seemed to see life in a broader, calmer way, as if challenges were simply part of a larger rhythm that required patience and respect. Over the following days, the rancher found himself looking forward to these brief conversations. Work alone had been satisfying, but it was lonely in a way he hadn't anticipated.
The young Apache woman brought a new energy into his days, a reminder that life could be full of small wonders even amidst hard labor.
When he saw her, the world seemed lighter, and he carried a renewed spirit into the tasks that might have felt dull or exhausting before. Their conversations remained simple but meaningful. She told him about the river, the types of fish that lived there, and the plants that could heal minor injuries. He shared stories of his travels, his family, and the long journey that had brought him to this ranch. Though he knew little about her world beyond what she shared, he listened intently, fascinated by her perspective. He discovered that she had grown up with stories of her ancestors, learning respect, resilience, and courage from each one. Brit. The way she spoke about her heritage revealed a depth and strength that drew him closer with each encounter. Brit. Desperation. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and lavender, he walked along the river bank carrying a bucket of water for the cattle. She was there, tending a small garden near the edge of the woods. Brit. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, her expression gentle but welcoming. He approached, careful not to invade her space, and they walked a short distance together, talking about the river, the soil, and the animals. Brit. The conversation flowed easily, though neither spoke of personal feelings or desires. It was enough that they shared this time, each appreciating the other's presence. Brit. The rancher began to notice the small gestures that made her remarkable. The way she adjusted a bent plant without harming it, the care with which she carried water, the attention she gave to every small task. Brit. He admired her patience and skill, realizing that her connection to the land went far beyond simple work. It was a way of life, a philosophy that he found himself longing to understand. Brit. Each encounter left him thinking about her long after she had gone, and he began to recognize a feeling that was new to him, a quiet, steady admiration that bordered on longing. Despite the growing closeness, he remained cautious. Brit. He was aware that their worlds were different, and that societal expectations could make any relationship complicated. Yet he could not deny the way his heart responded to her presence, the sense that meeting her was not by chance but somehow meant to shape his life. Every glance, every shared smile added layers of meaning to his days, making the work on the ranch feel less like labor and more like preparation for something he could not yet define. He also began to reflect on his own life in ways he had not before. Brit. The ranch was important, yes, but it was not the only measure of success. Brit. There were connections, moments of understanding, and shared experiences that mattered just as much. Brit. Seeing her courage, her kindness, and her grace made him consider the kind of person he wanted to be, not just a successful rancher, but someone capable of appreciating life in its full complexity. One afternoon, while mending a fence near the western pastures, he overheard her helping a younger child untangle a fishing line by the river. She spoke patiently, her voice calm, her movements careful. Brit. He watched silently, feeling a warmth in his chest. She did not notice him, and yet her natural kindness was evident in every gesture. Brit. It struck him that her strength was quiet, unassuming, and yet deeply powerful. He realized that this was the kind of connection he had never experienced before, a bond that did not require words to be meaningful. Brit. As the weeks continued, their friendship grew in subtle ways. He learned to anticipate seeing her, to recognize the small signs of her presence, a glimpse of dark hair in the distance, the sound of her laughter carried by the wind, or the soft patter of her feet along the trail. Brit. These moments became highlights of his day, small joys that reminded him that life was more than survival and work. They were about connection, respect, and shared understanding. Brit. Yet amidst all the joy, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. He knew that their connection, though deepening, existed within boundaries he could not fully cross. Brit. He did not speak of his feelings openly, and she did not reveal her own. And so the bond grew in quiet, tender ways, each moment a building block of something fragile but unforgettable. It was a slow dance of awareness, a gentle acknowledgement of mutual respect and admiration that neither could yet name.
By the end of the second month, the rancher realized that he was no longer thinking of the young Apache woman as a stranger or a fleeting presence.
Brit. She had become a part of his daily life, woven into the rhythm of work and quiet reflection. He found himself imagining what it would be like to spend more time with her, to learn from her, and perhaps, one day, to share a deeper connection. Brit. Yet he also understood that such thoughts carried risks, and that patience was necessary. For now he cherished the simple moments, A shared smile, a brief conversation, a glance that spoke volumes. The rancher had arrived with a mind focused on work and the practical demands of the ranch. Brit. Now he carried with him something more delicate, yet no less important, the realization that life could bring unexpected connections that shaped the heart, even amidst long days of labor and solitude. Brit. The young Apache woman had opened a door to something new, a world of quiet joy, mutual respect, and unspoken understanding. And though he did not yet know what the future would hold, he knew that these days, these encounters, were forming memories he would never forget.
Brit. Even as night fell and the stars began to appear, he thought of her. He pictured her walking along the river, tending her garden, or smiling at him from a distance.
Brit. Each memory was vivid and warm, a gentle reminder that life often brings people into our path who change us forever. Brit. And so, as he settled into his cabin for the night, wary but satisfied, he carried with him a quiet hope that the connection they had found in the simplest moments might continue to grow, and that the lessons of patience, respect, and admiration would guide him in the days to come. Brit. Life on the ranch continued, and the bond between the rancher and the young Apache woman had grown quietly, like the river slowly shaping the stones along its banks. Each day brought new tasks, new challenges, and the ever-present sense of isolation that came with managing such a vast piece of land. Yet, no matter how demanding the work became, he carried the memory of her with him. Her kindness, strength, and quiet wisdom had become a source of comfort and inspiration. One morning, while preparing the cattle for a move to a new pasture, a messenger arrived from the town nearby. The man delivered a letter from the rancher's family, urging him to consider marriage. The letter spoke of stability, social expectations, and the honor of uniting with a family considered respectable and proper. It described a woman who was admired for her beauty, education, and manners, someone the family considered perfect. The rancher read the letter slowly, feeling a mixture of surprise, apprehension, and conflict. He had devoted himself to the ranch, to work, and to the quiet joys of life in the open land. But now, family expectations were pressing in, and he realized that choosing a partner was no longer just a personal matter. It carried social weight. He could not ignore the responsibilities placed upon him, even if his heart longed for the freedom to follow his own feelings. After several days of thought and reflection, he traveled to the nearby town to meet the woman his family had suggested. She was elegant, poised, and carried herself with the confidence of someone raised in a world very different from the dusty trails and open fields he had grown used to. Her manners were flawless, her conversation polished, and her presence commanding yet gentle. On the surface, she was everything one could wish for in a partner. The rancher felt a sense of respect for her, but he also noticed the subtle distance that grew between them. She was kind and attentive, but their connection lacked the natural warmth and understanding he had felt with the young Apache woman. He recognized that she could provide comfort, stability, and companionship in a conventional sense, but she could not replace the deep, unspoken bond that had formed quietly across the pastures and rivers. He returned to the ranch with a heavy heart, realizing that life often presented choices between duty and desire. The idea of marriage was now pressing closer, and he understood that, for the sake of his family and social standing, he would need to accept the path laid before him. Yet he could not forget the young Apache woman, whose presence had awakened feelings he had never known. Her memory lingered in every glance at the river, in the quiet moments of sunrise and sunset, and in the gentle rustle of the leaves along the paths she walked. As the weeks passed, arrangements for the marriage were made, preparations were set, visits planned, and customs observed. He tried to immerse himself in the practicalities of the ranch, focusing on feeding the cattle, maintaining fences, and preparing the land for the upcoming seasons. But no matter how hard he worked, the memory of the young Apache woman remained persistent, like a shadow he could not shake. He found himself thinking back to the small conversations they had shared, to the way she had explained the plants and herbs, and to the moments when their eyes had met with mutual understanding. Brit. Each memory was vivid, and each one reminded him of the connection that had been so natural, so effortless, and so rare. He realized that life could be full of obligations and duties, yet there were moments of genuine connection that could never be replaced. The young Apache woman, unaware of the changes occurring in his life, continued her routine near the river, tending her garden and helping her family. Their paths crossed less often now, and when they did, the encounters were brief. He greeted her politely, and she returned the gesture with her calm smile. But there was an unspoken awareness between them, a recognition that something important had shifted, even if words could not express it. Brit. Despite the growing distance, the rancher could not help but feel a deep sense of longing. He remembered her laughter, the way she moved with confidence and grace, and the quiet strength that had drawn him to her from the very beginning. Brit. He understood that his feelings were complicated. He respected the woman he was to marry, yet his heart still belonged, in part, to someone who existed outside the boundaries of convention. On the day he officially met his intended bride at the ranch, he felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. She arrived with her family, bringing gifts and smiles, all carefully measured to reflect propriety and grace. The rancher welcomed them, engaging in polite conversation and observing every detail of their visit. The woman was gracious and attentive, and he found that he could respect and even admire her. But no matter how pleasant the interactions, he felt a quiet emptiness that only reminded him of what he could not have.
The spontaneous, natural connection he had shared with the young Apache woman. Their first days together were filled with adjustments.
He learned to navigate the routines of hosting, attending to social expectations, and ensuring that his new bride felt welcome and comfortable. She was considerate, thoughtful, and eager to make the ranch a place of warmth and harmony.
She cared for the home, engaged in meaningful conversation, and showed interest in his life and work. He appreciated these qualities deeply, recognizing that she was a partner who could provide stability and support.
Yet, late at night, when the ranch was quiet and the stars shone above, his thoughts inevitably drifted to the young Apache woman. He remembered her soft voice, her gentle laughter, and the simple moments they had shared along the river and in the fields. Those memories carried a weight of longing, a bittersweet reminder that some connections could not be replicated, no matter how perfect another person might seem. He began to reflect on the nature of love and choice. The woman he had married fulfilled every expectation of society, but the Apache woman had touched his heart in ways that went beyond appearances or social conventions. He realized that life often demanded difficult decisions, that duty and desire rarely aligned perfectly, and that true connection was not always found in convenience or comfort. Despite the inner turmoil, he did his best to honor his marriage. He treated his wife with respect, kindness, and appreciation, recognizing that she had entered his life with genuine care and good intentions. He learned to share stories, laugh together, and create small moments of joy within their home. She was attentive and compassionate, and he found comfort in her presence, even as the memory of the young Apache woman lingered in the background of his heart. There were moments when he would visit the river or walk through the pastures, and the thought of the young Apache woman would rise like a quiet tide. He wondered how she was, what she was doing, and whether she thought of him as he thought of her. These thoughts were both a source of pain and a reminder of the beauty of human connection, the way someone could touch your heart deeply, even when circumstances made it impossible to be together. In these quiet reflections, he recognized the complexity of life. People came into our lives for reasons that were not always clear, and some bonds, though fleeting, left lasting impressions. The rancher began to understand that it was possible to honor obligations while still cherishing memories and feelings that could never fully fade. He accepted that his heart could carry both respect for his new wife and a quiet reverence for someone he could not forget. The young Apache woman remained a gentle presence in his thoughts. Her influence shaped the way he interacted with the land, with animals, and with people. He found himself more patient, more attentive, and more aware of the small details that made life meaningful. Though he could not act on his feelings, he carried them as a secret treasure, a source of quiet inspiration that reminded him of the richness of human experience. As the months passed, the rancher settled into his new life. He found joy in his work, satisfaction in the growth of the ranch, and comfort in the presence of his wife. Yet, no matter how full his days became, the memory of the young Apache woman remained vivid. She had taught him lessons he could not have learned otherwise, lessons about patience, respect, courage, and the quiet strength of character. He realized that love and admiration were not always tied to possession or social convention. Some connections existed beyond circumstance, untouched by expectation or duty. He carried this understanding into every interaction, allowing it to shape his choices, his perspective, and his heart. And though the path ahead would bring challenges, responsibilities, and decisions that required care, he knew that the lessons of the past, the fleeting moments with the young Apache woman, would remain with him forever. The rancher had married the woman his family had chosen for him, fulfilling duty and expectation. But deep within, he recognized that life was full of layers, and that even in the most structured existence, there was space for memory, longing, and quiet reflection. The young Apache woman had left an indelible mark on his heart, a reminder that some encounters were unforgettable, and that true connection could exist in subtle, unspoken ways. And so, the rancher continued his days, balancing work, duty, and the quiet desires of his heart. He nurtured the land, cared for his wife, and carried the memory of the young Apache woman with him like a soft, enduring flame. It was a life of contrasts, of obligation and longing, of duty and unspoken admiration, but one that was rich, meaningful, and full of lessons that could not be learned any other way. Even as the rancher settled into the rhythm of his married life, memories of the young Apache woman refused to fade. They came unbidden, like whispers carried by the wind across the open fields, filling the quiet moments of his day with longing and reflection. He was grateful for his wife, who was kind, patient, and attentive to his needs. She fulfilled every expectation society and his family had placed upon him, yet she could not occupy the space in his heart that had been quietly claimed by someone else long before he had married. The rancher tried to keep busy, focusing on the work that required his attention. The cattle needed feeding, the fences required mending, and the land demanded constant care. Yet no amount of labor could distract him completely. He often found himself pausing mid-task, staring at the horizon, imagining her walking along the river, tending her garden, or laughing softly at something simple and ordinary. Those fleeting images filled him with both warmth and ache, a mixture of joy and sorrow that was difficult to reconcile. Sometimes he would recall the way her eyes had sparkled when she spoke of the land, or the gentle strength she displayed while guiding children or tending the plants. It was a kind of beauty that went beyond appearance. It was in her movements, her voice, her patience, and her quiet understanding of life. These memories were vivid, almost tangible, and he would find himself replaying them again and again, unable to suppress the emotions they stirred. One afternoon, while walking along the edge of the pasture, he spotted her from a distance. She was collecting firewood for her family, her posture straight and purposeful, her hands steady as she balanced the bundle. He hesitated, unsure whether to approach or keep his distance. There was a part of him that longed to speak, to ask about her life, and to hear her voice again. Yet he also understood the boundaries that now existed between them. He remained silent, watching quietly as she moved through the familiar landscape, carrying herself with the same quiet dignity and strength he had admired from the beginning. The rancher realized that the longing he felt was no longer simply nostalgia. It was a deep emotional connection that he could not erase, even if he wanted to. He began to reflect on the nature of memory and human attachment. understanding that some encounters leave marks on the soul that cannot be removed by time or circumstance. Britt. He acknowledged to himself that he might never have the opportunity to be with her. Yet the thought of her presence continued to shape his daily life, inspiring him in subtle ways and reminding him of the beauty of connection. Evenings became the hardest time for him, Britt. After long hours of work, he would sit by the cabin, watching the sun dip behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant calls of animals. Britt. It was in these moments of solitude that his thoughts wandered most freely to her. He remembered the laughter they had shared, the soft greetings, and the moments when they had walked silently together, sharing the simple comfort of being in each other's company. Britt. At times he struggled with guilt. He loved his wife, respected her, and wanted to honor the life they were building together. Britt. Yet he could not deny the lingering attachment to someone he had met before, someone who had awakened emotions he had never experienced. Britt. He wondered if he was being unfair to himself and to his wife, but he also recognized that the human heart is complex and cannot always be commanded to follow reason alone. The rancher began to notice how these memories affected his daily interactions. He was more patient with the cattle, more attentive to the land, and more thoughtful in his approach to work. The young Apache woman had influenced him in ways he had not realized. Desperate. Her quiet strength, resilience, and understanding of the natural world had left an imprint on him, shaping not only his emotions, but also his character.
Desperate. He found that he carried a part of her wisdom in his own decisions, in the way he approached challenges, and in the calm patience he applied to his labor. One afternoon, while tending to a broken fence, he overheard distant laughter from the direction of the river.
For a moment his heart leaped and he wondered if it was her. He turned, straining his eyes to see through the trees, but she was not there. Yet the sound lingered, echoing in his mind and stirring a mix of hope and disappointment. It reminded him of the unpredictability of life, of the moments that arrive and depart with fleeting beauty, and of the importance of cherishing what cannot always be possessed. The rancher also reflected on the nature of love and memory. He realized that his feelings for the young Apache woman were not merely romantic. They were rooted in admiration, respect, and a profound recognition of her character. He understood that some connections exist beyond the possibility of union, that certain people touch our lives in ways that endure even without physical closeness. These thoughts comforted him, providing a framework to understand his emotions and allowing him to accept the situation without despair. Despite the emotional weight of these reflections, life continued with its practical demands. The ranch required constant attention, and he could not allow longing to prevent him from fulfilling his responsibilities. He worked long hours, ensuring that the cattle were fed, the fences repaired, and the land maintained. Yet, even in these tasks, he found traces of her influence. The way he observed the animals, the care he took with the plants, and the patience he applied to every chore were all subtly shaped by the lessons he had learned from her presence. Even without conscious thought, he began to understand that memory could serve as a source of strength. The moments he had shared with her, though brief, provided guidance and perspective. They reminded him of the importance of kindness, the value of observation, and the quiet power of resilience.
These memories became a lens through which he viewed the world, encouraging him to approach both work and life with a thoughtful, deliberate heart. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and violet, he found himself walking along the riverbank.
The water reflected the colors of the sky, rippling gently over stones and fallen branches. He paused, remembering the days they had walked along this very path, speaking in hushed tones, sharing simple stories, and exchanging silent acknowledgments of mutual respect. He felt a pang of longing, tempered by gratitude for the experience and recognition of its significance. He realized that part of loving someone, even from afar, was learning to accept that connection as it exists, rather than as one might wish it to be. He could not change the circumstances, nor could he erase the bond he felt. All he could do was carry it with him, allowing it to enrich his life in quiet, meaningful ways. But the young Apache woman had left a permanent mark on his heart, shaping not only his feelings but also his outlook on life and relationships. As the night deepened and stars emerged, he returned to his cabin, reflecting on the day in the past. But he thought about the choices he had made, the responsibilities he had accepted, and the life he was building with his wife. Yet he also held in his heart a space reserved for memory, for longing, and for the quiet, unspoken bond that had changed him in ways he could not fully explain. But it was a reminder that life is layered, complex, and rich with moments that cannot be fully controlled, and that sometimes the most meaningful connections are those that remain just out of reach. Through all this, he discovered a new kind of strength, Brit. It was a strength born of acceptance, of understanding that life's beauty is not always found in possession or certainty, but in recognition, memory, and gratitude. Pretend. He could honor his marriage, tend a ranch, and live responsibly, all while holding dear the lessons and emotions inspired by someone who had entered his life unexpectedly.
And so, each day became a careful balance of work, duty, and reflection.
The rancher honored the responsibilities before him, finding satisfaction and purpose in the tangible achievements of ranch life. At the same time, he allowed himself to feel, remember, and appreciate the enduring presence of someone who had changed his perspective on love, patience, and human connection. In this quiet, thoughtful way, he discovered that even longing could be beautiful, and that the heart could hold multiple truths at once: respect and desire, duty and memory, love that is given and love that endures without expectation. Through the passing seasons, the memory of the young Apache woman remained a constant, a soft, guiding presence in his life. She had taught him that connection does not always require possession, that admiration can be its own reward, and that some people leave marks on our hearts that last a lifetime. Even as he faced the challenges and responsibilities of daily life, her influence remained with him, quiet but profound, a reminder of the complexity and beauty of human emotion. The rancher understood that life would not always be simple or predictable. He had responsibilities, relationships, and duties that demanded attention and care. Yet he also knew that within those constraints, there was room for reflection, memory, and the quiet strength that comes from loving and admiring someone without needing to claim them. It was a lesson in patience, humility, and the enduring power of connection. A lesson that would guide him through the days, months, and years to come. And so he continued his work, his marriage, and his life on the ranch, carrying the memory of the young Apache woman like a cherished secret. It was a presence that neither disrupted nor diminished his responsibilities, but enriched them, adding layers of understanding, empathy, and quiet joy. Though the world demanded practicality and duty, he had discovered that the heart can hold beauty, longing, and admiration all at once, and that these feelings can coexist with the life one builds in the tangible world. Seasons changed on the ranch, each bringing its own challenges and beauty. Spring gave way to summer, with long days of sun warming the fields and the river flowing full and strong. The rancher worked tirelessly, guiding the cattle, repairing fences, and tending to the land that had become both his responsibility and his home. Over time, he had grown skilled, confident, and respected by the few neighbors and townspeople who visited or worked nearby. Yet, despite the satisfaction of labor and the rhythm of everyday life, his heart continued to carry the quiet presence of the young Apache woman. Though he had married the woman his family had chosen, fulfilling expectations and duties, he had come to understand that life's most meaningful connections were not always those that could be possessed. His wife was loving, attentive, and kind, and she had brought stability and companionship to his life. He valued her deeply, and they had learned to work together, sharing the responsibilities of the ranch and supporting each other in small, meaningful ways. Yet the memory of the Apache woman remained untouched by these circumstances. She existed in a different space within his heart, a space reserved for admiration, longing, and reflection. Brit. The rancher often walked alone in the evenings, watching the sun dip behind the hills, the sky ablaze with colors that seemed almost unreal. Brit. In those quiet moments, he would remember the laughter they had shared, the moments of silence they had experienced together, and the way she had moved with confidence and grace across the land. Brit. He realized that these memories were more than nostalgia. They were a source of guidance, inspiration, and a reminder of the beauty of connection. They had shaped him in ways he could not fully explain, influencing the way he worked, observed, and treated the people and animals around him. Over the months, he began to reflect more deeply on the lessons he had learned from this unspoken bond. He understood that love could take many forms and that admiration could be just as powerful as possession. Brit. He had discovered that human connections are not always defined by circumstance or proximity, but by the impact they leave on the heart and mind. Brit. The young Apache woman had taught him patience, empathy, and respect for the world around him, lessons that could be applied not only to relationships but also to life itself. His relationship with his wife continued to grow in its own way. Brit. She had her own strengths, virtues, and kindnesses that he had come to appreciate fully. He respected her intelligence, admired her diligence in managing the home, and valued the companionship she offered. Brit. Time. Together they created a life that was comfortable and nurturing, a life built on mutual understanding and shared responsibility. Brit. And yet, the rancher realized that his love for her could coexist with the quiet longing he felt for someone else, a truth that both confused and enlightened him. The memory of the young Apache woman was never a source of guilt or shame. Brit. Rather, it was a reminder that life is layered and complex, and that the heart can carry multiple truths simultaneously. He learned to accept this duality, understanding that honoring his marriage and appreciating his wife did not require erasing the past. Brit. Instead, he carried the lessons and the memories with him, allowing them to enrich his life rather than diminish it. This understanding brought a sense of peace, a quiet resolution to the tension that had existed in his heart for so long. But one afternoon, while checking on the cattle near the river, he saw a familiar figure at a distance. It was the young Apache woman, tending to a small garden near the riverbank. Their eyes met briefly, and he felt the familiar warmth in his chest, a mixture of recognition and admiration. She smiled politely, acknowledging him with the same calm grace he had always admired. Brit. They did not speak, for words were unnecessary. In that silent moment, there was a deep understanding between them, a recognition that life had taken them on different paths, yet the connection they had shared remained intact. Brit. The rancher continued his work, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He had learned that love and connection are not always about possession or closeness. Brit. Sometimes the greatest impact comes from allowing someone to influence your life without demanding anything in return. Brit. The young Apache woman had left an indelible mark on him, shaping the way he saw the world, the way he approached his work, and the way he interacted with those around him. Brit. Her presence, though distant, was a guiding force that reminded him of the importance of patience, respect, and quiet strength. As the years passed, the rancher and his wife built a life filled with routine, labor, and small joys. They shared meals, celebrated harvests, and supported each other through the trials that came with ranch life. His respect and affection for her deepened, and he found genuine happiness in their companionship. Yet the memories of the young Apache woman remained a private treasure, a part of his inner world that he carried with gratitude rather than regret. He understood that some experiences are meant to teach, inspire, and shape us, even if they cannot be fully realized or possessed. He often thought about the lessons of patience and resilience that the young Apache woman had taught him through her actions, her words, and her presence. He realized that these lessons were applicable not only to relationships, but also to the broader challenges of life. By observing her, he had learned to approach difficulties with calm determination, to treat others with respect, and to appreciate the subtle beauty in everyday moments. These teachings had become a guiding principle in his life, quietly influencing his decisions and his character. The rancher also reflected on the nature of longing and memory. He understood that some connections remain with us not because they are fulfilled, but because they shape who we are. The young Apache woman had become part of the story of his life, a chapter that could not be rewritten or erased. But the head became a piece. Her influence had shown him that the heart is capable of holding multiple forms of love, admiration, respect, and affection, without diminishing the love one shares with a partner. This realization brought him a profound sense of peace and acceptance. In the quiet hours of the night, when the ranch was still and the stars shimmered above, he would sit outside his cabin and reflect on his journey. He thought about the hard work, the successes, and the challenges that had marked his years on the ranch.
He thought about his wife, whose companionship and care had brought him stability and comfort, and he thought about the young Apache woman whose brief yet meaningful presence had left an everlasting impression on his heart.
Desperate. In these reflections, he found a deep appreciation for the complexity and richness of life. The rancher understood that life is a tapestry of experiences, some of which are tangible and permanent, and some of which exist only in memory and influence.
Both are equally important in shaping who we become. He had learned to honor his responsibilities, cherish his marriage, and embrace the beauty of the land he had chosen to call home.
At the same time, he had learned to carry the memory of someone who had inspired him, a reminder that life's most profound lessons often come in subtle, fleeting moments. Through it all, he remained mindful of the present, attentive to his work, and grateful for the life he had built. Yet the quiet presence of the young Apache woman remained a source of reflection, teaching him that the heart is not limited to a single connection or experience. He had learned that it is possible to love, admire, and respect more than one person in different ways, and that true understanding comes from accepting the complexity of one's emotions rather than trying to simplify them. As the rancher looked out over the rolling fields, the river glinting in the late afternoon sun, he felt a sense of completeness. His life was not perfect, nor was it simple. It was filled with challenges, responsibilities, and memories that sometimes brought longing. Yet it was rich, meaningful, and full of lessons that had shaped him into the man he had become. He had loved, admired, and learned, and in doing so, he had discovered the enduring power of human connection. He understood now that some people enter our lives not to stay physically, but to leave an indelible mark on our hearts and souls. The young Apache woman had done exactly that. Her influence had guided him, inspired him, and helped him grow into someone who could appreciate both duty and desire, responsibility and longing, love given and love remembered. He carried these lessons with him every day, allowing them to shape his actions, his relationships, and his understanding of life itself.
In the end, the rancher found peace and acceptance.
He had married the woman chosen for him, honoring family and societal expectations. He had built a successful life on the ranch, working tirelessly to care for the land and the animals that depended on him. And he had allowed the memory of the young Apache woman to remain a cherished part of his inner world, a reminder of the power of human connection, admiration, and the beauty of fleeting yet unforgettable encounters. The story of his life became one of balance, a balance between duty and desire, between love and longing, between the tangible present and the cherished memories of the past. He had learned that life's richest experiences are often those that cannot be fully held, that some connections exist to teach us, inspire us, and shape the very essence of who we are. And in carrying these lessons forward, the rancher found a quiet, enduring sense of fulfillment, a deep appreciation for the complexity and beauty of the human heart. He knew that no matter where life took him, the memory of the young Apache woman would remain with him. a gentle, guiding presence, a reminder that some encounters, however brief, leave marks that last a lifetime. And with this understanding, he faced each new day with patience, gratitude, and a heart full of wisdom, knowing that love, memory, and respect are gifts that endure even across time and circumstance.